The Senate Judiciary Committee chamber fell silent. Former Vice President Harris sat upright at the witness table, her face composed as 27-year-old White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt stood confidently at the microphone. What began as a routine hearing on Trump-era border policies had suddenly taken an unexpected turn. Vice President Harris, Leavitt began, her voice steady and clear across the chamber. You just testified under oath that your administration never adopted a catch-and-release policy at the southern border. Is that accurate? Harris leaned toward her microphone. That's correct. Our approach to border management was comprehensive. I'm sorry to interrupt. Leavitt interjected politely but firmly. But I need to clarify that statement. For the record, she reached into her folder and pulled out a document. This is an internal memo from the Department of Homeland Security, dated April 12, 2022. It's signed by Secretary Mayorkas and addressed directly to you. Leavitt held the document up. The official DHS letterhead was clearly visible on camera. This memo specifically references your administration's updated catch-and-release protocols. It also contains handwritten notes in the handwriting, proving the program's expansion. A wave of surprise swept through the chamber. Several senators leaned forward. Harris's lawyer whispered urgently in her ear. Would you like to revise your statement, Vice President Harris? Leavitt asked, her gaze steady. The next 30 seconds would shock Washington and forever change the political paths of both women. Before we dive further into this confrontation, be sure to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss any of our political analysis and major moments from Capitol Hill. The road to this critical moment began months earlier. Caroline Leavitt, at just 27, had become the youngest White House press secretary in history after President Trump returned to office. A New Hampshire native, she had served in Trump's first term as assistant press secretary, then as communications director for Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, before taking a leading role in Trump's 2024 campaign. Despite her age, Leavitt quickly proved herself a powerful advocate for the administration. Known for being highly prepared and unshakable, she turned daily press briefings into must-watch events. Critics saw her as blindly loyal. Supporters praised her for being a fact-driven communicator who frequently left veteran journalists without effective follow-ups. In contrast, Kamala Harris embodied the Democratic establishment. Since leaving office in January 2025, she had become a key voice defending the Biden administration's policies and strongly opposing Trump's revived immigration efforts, with a long resume including prosecutor, California Attorney General, Senator and Vice President Harris brought weight and credibility to her critiques. The Judiciary Committee's hearing on border enforcement had been planned months in advance. Harris had volunteered to testify in defense of her administration's immigration record and to critique Trump's new directives. Committee Chair Lindsey Graham made the unusual decision to allow the current press secretary to question Harris directly, citing the need for continuity and factual clarity. Democrats strongly objected, warning it would turn into political grandstanding. Senator Dick Durbin called the move inappropriate, arguing that letting a partisan press aide cross-examine a former vice president was without precedent. Republicans argued that Harris's testimony deserved direct questioning from someone well-versed in both administrations' policies. What few expected was just how thoroughly Leavitt had prepared. For 3 weeks before the hearing, she worked closely with teams from the Department of Justice and Homeland Security, examining thousands of internal documents, many of which had not been made public but were now accessible under the current administration. On the night before the hearing, Leavitt rehearsed extensively with former federal prosecutors. They advised her, "She's a seasoned prosecutor, don't try to out-debate her, just present verified evidence." Harris entered the hearing confident and well-prepared. In her opening remarks, she gave a strong defense of what she described as a humane and effective immigration policy. She labeled Trump's renewed hardline approach as cruel, ineffective, and misaligned with American values. Asterisk for the first hour. The hearing followed a predictable partisan pattern. Democratic senators offered questions that allowed Harris to elaborate on her defense. Republicans countered with statistics highlighting increased border crossings during her time in office. Asterisk. Then Leavitt was called upon to speak. The tone in the room shifted instantly. Unlike the senators, whose questioning often felt political, Leavitt approached her task like a litigator, methodically building a case. When she introduced the first key document from her folder, it was clear this would not be a routine exchange. Asterisk. The room held its breath. Harris looked to her attorney, then back at Leavitt, who remained still. The DHS memo raised for everyone to see. Asterisk. May I review the document you're referring to? Harris asked, her voice controlled but tight. Asterisk. Of course, Leavitt replied, walking forward to distribute copies to Harris, Chairman Graham, and all committee members. Asterisk. For the record, Leavitt continued. This document is titled Implementation of Revised Processing Protocols for Non-Detained Migrants, dated April 12, 2022, on page 3. Paragraph 2. Secretary Mayorkas writes, as discussed in our April 8 meeting, the expanded catch and release protocols will take effect on May 1st, pending your final approval. Asterisk. Cameras captured Harris reading the document. Her expression, unreadable. Asterisk. Senator Josh Hawley leaned into his mic. Ms. Leavitt, can you highlight the handwritten notes you referenced? Asterisk. Yes, Senator, she replied. In the right margin next to that paragraph is a handwritten note that reads, approved. Proceed as discussed. At the bottom of the same page, another note states, ensure messaging emphasizes enforcement, not release. Components. Asterisk. Senator Amy Klobuchar interrupted. Mr. Chairman, I object. These notes are unverified, and the document's authenticity hasn't been confirmed. Asterisk. Chairman Graham responded, objection is noted. Vice President Harris, do you recognize this document and the handwriting? Asterisk. All eyes turned to Harris, who had consulted again with her attorney. She straightened. Asterisk. Senator, this appears to be an internal document. I would need more time to verify its authenticity. But I can state confidently that our administration never had a blanket catch-and-release policy. Our protocols considered processing capacities and humanitarian factors. Asterisk. Leavitt responded without hesitation. To clarify, Vice President Harris, are you disputing the accuracy of the document? Or the notes? Asterisk. I'm simply saying I need to review it thoroughly before confirming anything. Harris replied, asterisk. I understand, Leavitt said, reaching for another document. This may help. Here is an email from your Chief of Staff to Secretary Mayorkas, dated April 15, 2022. It confirms receipt of the signed memo and reads, quote, the VP has approved revised catch-and-release protocols and requested implementation. Begin on May 1st as scheduled. Asterisk. A murmur spread through the room. Senator Ted Cruz whispered something to Senator Marsha Blackburn, who nodded solemnly. Asterisk. Leavitt continued. We also have calendar records showing you met with Secretary Mayorkas 3 times regarding these protocols, including the April 8 meeting mentioned in the memo. Asterisk. Harris's attorney leaned in again. She nodded before addressing the committee. Asterisk. Ms. Leavitt, let me clarify our position. Without confirming the specific documents, I must emphasize our administration never used the term catch and release in official settings. That label was imposed by critics. Our policies focused on systematic processing, including release with court notice, guided by risk assessments and capacity limits. Asterisk. Leavitt acknowledged with a nod. Thank you for that clarification. However, these internal records repeatedly use the phrase catch and release. In fact, I have 6 more memos and emails in which your team refers to the policy using that exact term. She held up another paper. This June 2022 briefing document prepared for your border visit includes talking points addressing, quote, expanded catch and release. The notes advise you to shift public messaging away from that terminology and instead emphasize humane processing. Asterisk. The chamber was now deeply still. Even Harris's most loyal supporters on the committee seemed uneasy. Senator Cory Booker attempted to shift the focus. Mr. Chairman, I believe we're drifting into semantics rather than addressing actual policy substance. Asterisk. With respect, Senator Leavitt responded, cutting in before Chairman Graham could speak. This is not about semantics. Vice President Harris testified under oath that her administration never enacted a catch-and-release policy. These documents clearly show that such a policy was not only implemented, but that the terminology was deliberately avoided in public while used internally. This is a matter of transparency and the accuracy of sworn testimony. Asterisk. Harris then responded. More directly, Ms. Leavitt, every administration makes difficult choices based on the realities they face. When we took office, detention facilities were over capacity and in unacceptable condition. We released individuals when appropriate, but only with strict vetting and oversight. If you're implying that we endorsed open borders, that is absolutely false. Asterisk. I'm not offering an opinion on the policy itself, Vice President Leavitt replied evenly. I'm simply presenting what the records from your administration confirm, which contradicts the statement you made under oath today. Asterisk. She then turned to her final piece of evidence. Asterisk. I'd like to submit this DHS data summary into the record. It shows that from May 2022 to December 2024, roughly 1.7 million migrants were processed and released into the United States under the protocols outlined in the memo we discussed. That represents a 324% increase from the prior administration. Asterisk. A wave of murmurs swept through the gallery. Senator Dick Durbin called for order, and Chairman Graham had to strike his gavel to restore silence. Asterisk. Once calm returned, Leavitt continued. Vice President Harris, in light of this data and the supporting documents, would you like to amend your previous testimony regarding the existence of a catch-and-release policy during your administration? Asterisk. The cameras zoomed in on Harris as she paused to consider her answer. She knew this would be the defining moment of the hearing and, possibly much more. After a quiet exchange with her attorney, she sat upright and looked directly at Leavitt. Asterisk. Ms. Leavitt, I'd like to be very precise, Harris said, with measured tone. Our administration adopted a broad strategy for managing the border. This included, in some cases, releasing individuals with a notice to appear in court. If the committee interprets that as a form of catch and release, then yes, such a policy did exist as part of our larger strategy. Asterisk. A collective gasp filled the room. Harris had conceded the point carefully framed, but a concession nonetheless. Asterisk. Leavitt, still composed, pressed ahead respectfully. Thank you for the clarification, Vice President. To ensure the record is complete, your earlier statement was, and I quote, "We never implemented a catch-and-release policy at the southern border." Would you now consider that statement to be inaccurate? Asterisk. Harris's attorney reached to caution her, but Harris gently waved it off. After a brief pause, she nodded. Asterisk. In light of the documentation presented, I would revise that statement. We implemented controlled release protocols that some have labeled as catch and release. Asterisk. Chairman Graham leaned in. Let the record show that the witness has amended her earlier testimony. Asterisk. Senator Josh Hawley followed up immediately. Vice President Harris, given this revision, were you aware at the time that your administration was not being fully transparent with Congress or the public when repeatedly denying such policies? During 2023 and 2024 hearings, Senator Harris began, but her attorney interjected. Mr. Chairman, that question invites speculation and is beyond the scope of this hearing. Asterisk. Graham responded. The witness may answer at her discretion. Asterisk. Harris composed herself. Our public messaging focused on the full scope of our policy, not individual elements. In hindsight, more direct communication might have been more effective. Asterisk. Sensing the shift in tone, Leavitt adjusted from cross-examination to inquiry. Asterisk. Vice President Harris, documents show that your administration made a deliberate decision to expand release. protocols in May 2022. Could you explain the reasoning behind that decision? This was a chance for Harris to offer policy justification rather than continue defending inconsistent statements. We faced several urgent challenges, she said. Detention centers were operating at 173% capacity. The pandemic was still a serious factor, and we had humanitarian concerns over conditions. Based on recommendations from senior DHS officials, we decided to allow certain low-risk individuals to be released under monitoring. This allowed us to concentrate enforcement resources on higher-risk cases. Leavitt nodded. That background is helpful. Would you agree that the current administration needs access to accurate information about these decisions to develop sound policy moving forward?
Absolutely, Harris responded. Learning from past experiences is essential to effective governance.
Leavitt posed her final question.
Then why did your transition team's briefing to the incoming DHS leadership state that no change release policy existed during your administration, when these documents clearly indicate otherwise?
The room again fell silent.
Harris's expression tightened slightly before she answered, Ms. Leavitt, I was not directly involved in drafting those briefing materials. If they included incorrect information, it should be corrected.
Leavitt thanked her and returned to her seat.
As she did, the weight of what had just happened began to settle across the room. A 27-year-old press secretary had compelled a former vice president and experienced prosecutor to revise sworn testimony, using nothing but internal documentation.
Senator Marsha Blackburn, when given the floor, said what many were already thinking.
Vice President Harris, I appreciate your willingness to correct the record, but I must point out that it took a young woman half your age, armed with documents you didn't expect her to have, to bring that truth forward in this hearing.
Harris maintained her composure, but the impact was undeniable.
From that point on, questions repeatedly returned to the information Leavitt had presented.
Instead of challenging current policy, Harris spent much of the remaining time explaining discrepancies.
When Chairman Graham finally adjourned the hearing 3 hours later,
the entire narrative had changed. What was meant to be a platform for Harris to critique Trump's immigration policies had instead become a stage for Leavitt to systematically dismantle her record.
As lawmakers gathered their notes,
Harris briefly locked eyes with Leavitt.
The younger woman gave a respectful nod.
After a moment's pause, Harris returned it a silent exchange between two professionals, one rising, the other forced to defend a shifting narrative.
By evening, clips from the exchange were trending
across social media. Hashtags like #Leavitt, Receipts Harris, and #BorderMemoGate flooded timelines. Cable news outlets ran the footage on repeat. Political analysts on all sides weighed in.
What we saw today was extraordinary, said
Gloria
Caroline Leavitt displayed the precision of a prosecutor and the control of a seasoned official.
The fact that she drew a revision from a former vice president and career prosecutor is extraordinary.
On Fox News, Sean Hannity opened his show with the headline, Caroline Leavitt, the White House's secret weapon. He hailed her as the face of future conservative leadership,
young,
fearless, and backed by evidence.
The Washington Post's headline the next morning read,
Leavitt forces Harris to revise border testimony with documents in hand.
The accompanying analysis noted, in a town where political theater often overwhelms substance,
yesterday's hearing provided a rare example of facts prevailing.
For the Trump administration, Leavitt's performance was seen as a significant win in the ongoing immigration debate. That night, President Trump called her directly from Air Force One to commend her.
The president was extremely pleased, a senior White House official told reporters.
Ms. Leavitt did what every public servant should, set the record straight, using the previous administration's own documentation.
Leavitt's profile skyrocketed overnight.
Interview requests poured in. Media outlets rushed to profile her rapid rise from New Hampshire operative to national figure.
Politico published a piece titled The Receipts General, chronicling how Leavitt spent weeks building her evidence dossier with assistance from veteran DOJ and DHS officials. She treated this like a courtroom, one administration aide told Politico. Every document checked, every quote cross-verified, every rebuttal anticipated. Harris never saw it coming. For Democrats, the hearing had become a significant blow. Kamala Harris had been positioning herself as a leading Democratic voice on immigration and a potential 2028 presidential contender. But her credibility on a signature issue had now taken a serious public hit. This is a real problem for Harris going forward, noted Democratic strategist David Axelrod. The issue isn't just that her testimony was contradicted, that the contradiction came from her own administration's internal documentation. That's much harder to dismiss as a partisan attack. Democratic leaders tried to shift attention back to the policy itself. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer released a statement urging that arguments over language not distract from what he described as the Trump administration's harsh and inhumane border policies. Still, even traditionally Democratic media outlets acknowledged the damage. Harris walked into a trap, wrote one MSNBC commentator. She expected the usual political back and forth. What she got instead was a focused, evidence-based presentation that left little room for the usual political maneuvering. Inside the Democratic Party, questions and frustrations surfaced quickly. Why hadn't Harris been better prepared? Why didn't her team expect that the current administration would have access to internal DHS records? Senior Democratic strategists privately expressed concern about the broader impact, especially on immigration, a subject that had long been a political vulnerability for the party. Within the White House, Caroline Leavitt's reputation soared. Chief of Staff Stephen Miller, who had initially questioned whether the young press secretary should be given such a high-profile assignment, soon became one of her strongest advocates. Caroline showed exactly why we prioritize substance over status and preparation over politics, Miller told staff during a closed-door meeting. She didn't rely on spin, she relied on facts. The consequences extended well beyond Leavitt and Harris. The Senate Judiciary Committee quickly announced follow-up hearings focused on transparency in communications between executive agencies and Congress. Government watchdogs filed Freedom of Information Act (FOIA) requests for additional records tied to immigration policy during the previous administration. More broadly, the hearing signaled a new dynamic in American politics, experience and stature once unshakable. Advantages had been eclipsed by rigorous preparation and verifiable evidence. In an era of real-time fact-checking and instant document access, narratives built on generalities are more vulnerable than ever, explained Melissa Harrison, a political science professor at Georgetown. Her analysis, widely circulated online, summed it up. We're witnessing a new era of political accountability. Caroline Leavitt didn't win by virtue of her rank, she won because she had command of the factual record. That marks a fundamental shift in how political power operates in the information age. 6 months later, Leavitt's influence had reshaped how the White House handled both press relations and congressional engagements. Briefings became more document-based, often accompanied by printed summaries and references distributed to the press. Inside the West Wing, staff began to follow what informally became known as the Leavitt Rule. Never make a potentially controversial claim unless you can immediately back it up with solid documentation. For Harris, the hearing marked a turning point. Though she remained a respected voice within Democratic circles, she quietly pivoted away from immigration and focused instead on topics like economic policy and voting rights, areas where her record faced less vulnerability from internal documentation. In private discussions with her advisors, Harris reportedly admitted to underestimating Leavitt. She described the experience as a sharp reminder that in today's political landscape, preparation, not age or title, determines success. Asterisk, 1 year after the exchange. Harvard's Kennedy School of Government included the confrontation as a featured case study in its political communication curriculum. Asterisk, what made this moment so significant? Said the professor, introducing the material, was how it flipped the traditional power dynamic. Leavitt didn't win through rhetoric or political savvy. She won because she brought the receipts. Asterisk, at a time when public trust in institutions is declining, the power of documented facts stood out. For the millions who watched the hearing unfold, the takeaway reached far beyond the political arena. Asterisk, it showed that preparation still matters and that truth, backed by evidence, can still carry weight in Washington. Asterisk, as one columnist wrote, Leavitt didn't just win a high-stakes hearing. She gave a lesson in accountability that will shape how public testimony is approached for years to come. Asterisk, in the ongoing war of competing narratives, she reminded the country of something easy to forget: facts still matter. Asterisk, wasn't that a remarkable confrontation? If you appreciated this in-depth political breakdown, make sure to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more detailed coverage of Washington's most dramatic moments. Let us know in the comments which political figures you'd like us to cover next, and we'll continue bringing you stories you won't find anywhere else. Asterisk,